This week we are going to discuss survey research, which is chapter 15 in our textbook. I also got information for this presentation from a couple of other places. The first place one of the places I got information from is a presentation I went to, I believe, 2 years ago at the National Athletic Trainers Association annual convention, and it was a presentation by Paula Samari Tarosi, who is the program director at Duquesne University. She did a presentation on developing and testing of the survey. She provided great information, so some of the information from this presentation comes from that presentation, and I also used information from Creswell's educational research textbook that I used a little while ago in a research methods class. So the objectives of this lecture are to understand the intent and use of survey research. Some of you may decide to use survey research in your project and or study, so get a good idea what that looks like. The different types of survey design, the different key characteristics of a survey, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of using survey research, how do you go about constructing a survey questionnaire. Just so you know, there's going to be some language that is pretty similar. A survey, a questionnaire, an instrument, and a tool can all mean the same thing. It's just the thing you're going to use to actually use for your study, the questionnaire asking questions. What are the steps in the process of conducting survey research, and how do we evaluate survey research? First of all, what is survey research? Survey research designs are used to describe, or they're descriptive research. The textbook calls this descriptive research. So all we're doing is describing things about our population or our sample. The type of things we are trying to describe is we're trying to determine different trends of a group. We can describe the opinions, the beliefs, the attitudes, and maybe even some behaviors of people. We can use survey research to do a follow-up analysis. For those of you that are doing a project and maybe you're presenting at a coaching clinic, you're going to develop an assessment tool, and so individuals will be assessing how you are doing as a coach that is teaching them a skill. So that's a survey. So that would be the follow-up analysis and or an evaluation tool. The investigator or the researcher, or you, administer a survey or questionnaire to a sample, and we talked about samples in the past, we'll talk about them again here, or the entire population. There are several different types of survey designs, and this information actually comes out of the Creswell book. And so we'll look at this chart, and the key things I want to point out to you is the time of data collection. Again, data collection is the actual, when we go out and do the survey, and we'll talk about next week, in experimental design where you're actually doing the study. So there's two different main types of survey designs. There's one that's called longitudinal, and there's another one which is called cross-sectional. Now longitudinal, it says there, study over time. Typically with longitudinal studies, we'll trace a particular group of individuals for a long time. You know, it could be a year, it can be 2 years, it can be 3 years, it can be a month. Depends on the length of the study. So it's different than a cross-sectional survey And the cross-sectional is 1 point in time. So you give this survey to an individual, they complete it, and that's all you do. So it's at 1 point in time. So as you can see there, between the longitudinal and cross-sectional, there's different reasons why we use each one. The longitudinal, we can look at trends in the same population over time. Or we can look at changes in that subpopulation or group identified by a common characteristic over time. Or we can look at changes in the same people over time. So again, the key thing is that it's not just one time. We can do multiple interviews or give them surveys, questionnaires over quite a few periods of time. Cross-sectional is just one time and one time only. You just see how you evaluate them at that time. So the different ways we can do is added to, you can read all those things in that blocks, different ways that we do cross-sectional. What are the key characteristics of survey research? I've said this a few times already, is we're taking a sample from a population, then we're going to collect data through questionnaires or interviews. We design instruments for data collection, and hopefully we obtain a high response rate that gives us better results in the end. So our population is just a group of individuals having a characteristic that distinguishes them from some other group. From that population, we have a target population, or it can also be called a sampling frame. Sometimes we call it a target sample. Is the actual list of sampling units from which the sample is selected. And I'll talk about this a little bit later when I talk about a pilot study. And the sample is the actual group of participants in the study selected from the target population, from which the researcher generalizes to the target population. So our sample, we send them the instrument, they have them complete the survey, they send it back, you run the data on it and run the statistics, and then hopefully we can make some generalized statement or interpretations back to our population as a whole. We can have some error in survey research, so there's some things that we can do to reduce these 4 different types of error. First kind of error is coverage error. We're not having enough individuals, so we need to have good sampling frame lists on which to select our individuals. The sampling frame list, again, is the list of all the individuals that can possibly be part of your target population. Reducing sampling error, we select as large a sample from a population as possible. We want to get as many people involved as we possibly can, so we know that we have the similar values, attitudes, beliefs, or whatever you're choosing to survey from the target as the population does. Reducing measurement error, you want to use a good instrument with clear, unambiguous questions and response options that is valid and reliable. And we're going to talk about what all that means for a major portion of this presentation. Reducing non-response errors, which means that the people do not return your survey. We're going to use rigorous administration procedures to achieve as large a return rate as possible. And we'll talk about that, how to go about reducing that error. There are some advantages and disadvantages to using survey research. Now, in my dissertation, I actually used survey research. I've had quite a few students in this graduate program use survey research. So, just so you know, it's a good form of research, but it does take some work. So, first, there are advantages of survey research. We have a standardized set of questions. Everybody will be asked the same question. We know what we're going for, and it helps us to compare all the individuals using standardized set of questions. We can have unbiased by interview participation, and then we get rid of any kind of bias. If we're interviewing an individual, we can have some bias in what how we ask them questions and our interpretation. With a questionnaire, we don't have any bias like that, unless you put it in your survey instrument. Answered on a subject's time frame, which is really good. They have time to do it. It takes them whatever time it should take them to do it, 15-20 minutes. They're not up against, if you're doing like an experimental design, they have to be there 3 times a week for 30 minutes at a time. So another advantage is it allows for anonymity, which is privacy, which encourages them to be more honest and candid with their responses. So hopefully we're getting good responses from the subject. Another advantage is that research is conducted on researchers' timetable, and they have control, which is nice. You're not under, again, where you have to be at a certain place for a certain amount of time. The other great advantage of survey research is the ability to collect large amounts of data, and it's pretty inexpensive, especially if you set up electronic versions of this where the participants can just go online and do it that way. It's pretty inexpensive. Another advantage is the ability to reduce social effects, meaning that a person might have a fear of expressing their own opinions, or fear of providing accurate information in front of other individuals. I forgot a word there, sorry about that. Providing accurate information in front of other people. Now, there are some disadvantages of survey research. It is limited by self-reporting system. What that means is we're basing it on people, and we're not too sure if they're going to report it the right way. Sometimes we're not able to validate the data, may not be good data, and we may have some kind of subject biases where, well, I'm going to screw this survey up anyways, and I can answer it the correct way. We also may have misinterpretation or misunderstanding in the questions or response choices. They may just completely not understand what you're asking and answer the question incorrectly, or they may just fill out the questionnaire incorrectly, and they think a 1 means good but actually means bad, and they answer it the wrong way. And there's really no way to measure consistent interpretation by all subjects, so it's just a disadvantage. Other disadvantage is that you got to work with people who are literate, meaning they understand the issues that you're trying to get a perception of or ideal of. They have to have the background information, and that comes in with picking the correct individuals to be in your survey. And good survey requires survey validation, and that takes a lot of work. It's a bit of work to make sure that your survey instrument actually measures what it's supposed to measure. Another disadvantage is it's pretty time intensive on the front end of things. It takes a lot of setup to get ready to actually collect data. For my dissertation, since I had to develop a questionnaire, it took a good year for me to develop my questionnaire to make sure it was a valid instrument. Now, none of you should really have to spend that kind of time on that, but there is a little bit of work to do it, and there's really not an easy way out for us researchers to do it if you're going to do it the right way. You can also have possible research bias impacting the results, meaning that you write the questions with already bias in them. You're already expecting an answer, and so that's why it's important to have other individuals help you who are non-biased write a questionnaire. A lot of this information that's being provided in this podcast and in the textbook is with the assumption that a questionnaire needs to be developed, and I'll talk about other ways that you can go about doing this without developing your own questionnaire in just a little bit. There can be possible sample or population apathy or frustration, which decreases response accuracy or rate, meaning basically that's a long way of saying that I just don't want to do this questionnaire and I don't really care about the results. So the individuals who fill it out and turn it back in don't do a very good job with it, don't take it serious, or the other one is they just don't do it, and so you don't get their opinions. Over or underutilization of data collected. What that means is sometimes we can a lot of individuals like me, we get a lot of individuals who ask us to do surveys, and we just don't have the time to do all the collection of data. Ask too many questions in a survey, don't ask enough questions to really answer your question. So it's really a poor construction of a survey instrument. Alright, so those are the advantages, disadvantages. Let's talk about the steps, the process for developing survey research process. So step 1 is define research, purpose of the research. Step 2 is develop research questions and subtopics. Or 3 is to investigate existing literature. Step 4 is clarifying and refocus research questions. Establish validity of the instrument. 6 is determine your sample. And step 7 is data acquisition and analysis. We're going to spend most of our time talking about steps 1 through 5. So let's jump right into this. Step 1, developing the purpose. As we said previously in this class, this would be a research topic. So we want to begin with the specific purpose of the project. So we've already had a research ideal. Now we're becoming a little bit more specific. So example here is to identify whether children who participate in summer youth baseball games are safe. So it's very general, but it's specific too. Then we clarify undefined words or generalized concepts in a research question. What does children mean? Is it both boys and girls, or is it just boys or just girls? We need to clarify that. These would be operational definitions. Youth, what age group are we talking about here? Youth is pretty vague. So under the age of 12 years old, for example. And what the heck is considered safe? League team implemented, all prevention methods recommended. So we have to give some clarification of some of these words in our purpose statements and our research questions. So then we redefine the purpose, make it a little bit more clear. So the purpose of this study is to obtain health and safety information about youth baseball. The information gathered from this study will be used to help leagues to develop plans to improve the health and safety for all children, coaches, and spectators who are associated with youth baseball. Still good. It's good purpose. Let's make it a little bit better. So in step 2, we develop possible research questions. We haven't got to the final research question yet. We're still on the developing stage. Questions emerge from the important issues, and these important issues are called constructs, and these are the important issues related to the purpose of the research. So for example, it is important for youth baseball programs to implement preventable suggestions of the National Athletic Trainers Association, or the NATA. Implementation of these suggestions will decrease the incidence of injuries in youth baseball. A lot of these important issues are constructs, which are the key issues within the question. Can be done through brainstorming all possible research questions that can be covered. Just brainstorm, get with some other people or yourself, just write down everything you can think of on that possible research questions or questions that you may have. Then you want to narrow the purpose and the scope of your research. You want to get more specific. So the purpose of this study is to, and you really need to start all your research purpose statements like this, and if you're not doing a study, you're doing a project, purpose of this project is to, so the purpose of this study is to obtain health and safety information about youth baseball. The working research questions is, are coaches knowledgeable of the requirements for EAP and SOPs Now, EAP stands for Emergency Action Plans, and SOPs are standard operation procedures. So we want to know, are the coaches knowledgeable for these requirements? Are the EAPs and SOPs implemented in youth baseball programs? We want to know the answer to that question. Do those programs with EAPs and SOPs have a lower incident of injuries as compared to those who do not? Those are really good, three good research questions. Now, from those research questions, we would develop research or null hypothesis. Now, for example, there will be no differences between those programs with EAPs and SOPs that have there will be no significant differences between the programs that have SOPs and those that don't have SOPs.